WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisEye to 44321.
Representative Pat Snyder of Weston is the incumbent candidate for the 85th Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Representative Snyder, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Well, thank you for having me back. I always see you guys on the session floors and at our committee hearings. So
well, thanks.
Good to see you guys.
Thanks for coming to our candidate interviews. What's your campaign's key message while you're running for re-election?
I think there's things I want to finish, especially when it comes to our children and families, and also to be able to help with the child care situation, some of the other issues that didn't quite make it through this last session. I'm kind of, as they always seem to go to the golf adage, I'm closer to the 18th hole now than I was the 10th hole. So there's some things I want to complete. And when you do run for office, you got to have your partner, which is your spouse, also put input if they want to finally say, let's retire and things. So, we're getting toward the end, but I do want to make this a very beneficial term coming up here.
So if you're reelected, what's an example of a bill that would be a priority for you?
Well, this past summer, Representative Jill Billings and I went to a conference down in Naperville, and Michigan has done a really interesting thing on setting aside $5 million because for child care. Now, the reason is that for a child care startup for local, let's say in-home licensed daycare, it costs between $2,000 and $2,500 to get licensed, to get background checked, to get your house in order, to qualify for this. They actually provide this. Michigan does for cover the costs so they can get into it. I think especially in the north where there's waiting lists in some of the daycare centers, I think something like this would help a lot if we could get more in-home licensed daycare, because there's also, I think, would take the stress off the waiting lists in the other daycare facilities, but also I think it would be a little financially easier for some of the families in those situations, and then work on the other situations as well. Maybe businesses want to pool together and have a daycare for their workers and their families. See if there's somehow incentive that we could help there. I always think of child care as more of a workforce development issue because we want folks in the workforce. So I think it should be a public-private type partnership where if the business invests in the parents for their daycare, give an example, $300, parents pay $100, business pay $100, maybe then the state could get involved and say, we'll support the business with $100 of our own.
Well, maybe you've already answered this, but if you're reelected, you're entering during a biennial budget year and the state's expected to have a more than $3 billion surplus. What are your top two priorities for use of that surplus funding?
Well, first and foremost, I think, is with the inflation and what I'm hearing at the doors, somehow we got to get the money back into the pockets of our constituents and our taxpayers, because a lot of them are going paycheck to paycheck and making tough decisions. And I think, we tried to get some of the tax cuts through. We thought we had, the last tax cut would be the salary range of $38,000 or $39,000 a year up to about $150,000, but the governor didn't quite match what he wanted. He vetoed it. We tried to get tax cut for married couples, and he vetoed that. And we tried to get a tax cut for seniors with their pension plan of $70,000 of their own pension, because we don't tax Social Security in the state, but their own pensions, up to $70,000 of their pension per year, not to be taxed, but he didn't like that either. So he did do the child credit, which is good, but I think we need to revisit that because we need to get that money back. But other surplus issues, I think, would be into the child care. Mental health, I think, would be an area that I'd like to see some of that. But for the most part, I always look at surplus as trying to fix a problem, not just put a Band-Aid that we got to come back to. Because if you have to keep coming back, lean years will be tough to be able to match that, and we'll leave people hanging that we were able to take care of now. So that's kind of my thoughts of surplus.
K-12 education is a leading issue for many voters. What is your campaign's top priority for K-12 education?
Well, I think we did a pretty good job the last session, almost $1 billion into the K-12. I think it was the highest part of our budget. We got it up to $100 million in special ed. I heard that from a lot of our superintendents and school districts. That was an area needed, and we need to do a little bit more on that. Increase
the special ed percentage?
Yeah, I do. You know, back in the day, the feds paid a lot of the special ed, up to 60%, and then they suddenly disappeared. I wish they would get a little more involved again with that. I think, too, we were able to increase the per pupil up to $325 a year in the biennium, and we increased it, I think, by $523 million, our education. So that's an area. I work very well with our CISA 9 and trying to implement different things, as well as the superintendent of Medford. If reelected, we're going to work together to try to get legislation to help them and teachers. I think that, just in my opinion, and maybe this isn't going to sit well with some of the administrators, but I think schools are almost administrative heavy, and I think they might look at those situations and maybe not have as many administrators, and then pay their teachers more money. That's where we need to focus.
What does the future of Wisconsin's higher education system look like to you, including four-year colleges, two-year colleges, technical colleges? Where should the legislature be focusing?
Right. Well, I think we want to help all of them. I know that the governor has some high aspirations for that, so that'll be interesting in the budget. We want to keep the UW system. I know in Madison, with the research and all the good things it done fiscally, able to accomplish those goals. I am concerned. I saw a chart that said by 2025 we're going to start seeing a downward trend in enrollment in schools, K through 12, which would lead to maybe a downward enrollment. And I'm worried about especially the two-year schools. I wish Wisconsin in the past would have looked to what Iowa, Minnesota, and Illinois did, and that was combine two-year liberal arts with the technical schools and form community colleges. I think they would be healthy now. I think, right now our two-year schools are merging, UWSP and Wausau and Marshfield. I don't know how long we can sustain that if the enrollment keeps going down. Chancellor Gibson at UWSP does a great job there. I was lucky enough to get, in the past two sessions, two of my budget requests for buildings there at UW-Stevens Point, so I was happy about that. When it comes to technical colleges, I'm a huge fan. I tell you what, kids can come in here, they can start their four-year program, they can get their two-year associate degree and get into the workforce, maybe not have as much student debt. It seems to be more friendly for the non-traditional student that maybe wants to restart a career. So I'm high on the technical college, but you know what, we need more apprenticeships. I think those are good, and we need to be able to also think about the trades, because there are some tremendous opportunities from electricians to carpenters to you name it, to be able to get in and really have high-functioning jobs.
What do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and how would you address it?
I think the biggest thing, if you talk to the people out there, is workers, to be able to find workers. I know that here in the Wausau area, and I talked to the Chamber of Commerce, they said that we're probably about 8,000 to 10,000 short of people that we could find working. I think it's twofold. I think that the salaries are good, anywhere from 20 to 25 an hour and more, but it's just that we just can't find that workforce. I think it's going to be twofold, that we, again, try to go into the two-year programs and see if we can help out. Today at NTC College, they have middle school kids visiting this, so that's another opportunity to see other options besides maybe just the 4-year school. That will help our workforce. But I do think another thing that the feds can help us out in, and really is necessary, is that we need to get like workforce brokers in other countries. You know, we talk about the border and people flooding across and things. There's a good majority that want to work. And I think if we somehow had brokers in other countries that we would be able to contact, know who they are, identify them, and then get them up here and work. A lot of places could use that. And I think immigration is one area that we really need to look at to help fill some of the losses in the workforce development.
I have two more workforce questions
Sure.
for you. Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy. This also provides an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
Well, I think I definitely would favor the local people first, but if the local people aren't available, we have to be able to reach out from across the states and things to that nature. When you mandate something only with Wisconsin residents, you are kind of putting us in a bind if we can't find them. So I would say, similar to what maybe we should do in the universities, Wisconsin residents first, then go to out of state. We should do the same thing on something like this for workforce.
Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this issue and what should be done about it?
I didn't realize it was so prevalent, if it is. I think that hopefully most of our construction people are following our state laws, and I think if they are going under the rules of law, they should be, found out. I think that, if you're trying to take advantage of people that maybe are not documented and things to that nature by paying them under the table or lower wages, threatening them with possible exposure, that's just humanely wrong. You can't do that. And so I would hope that things like that they follow it. But I didn't know it was a widespread problem. I'm on the Workforce Development Committee, and it really hasn't been brought up to our committee yet. But hopefully in the next session, if it is a big problem, we can bring it in and see if there's a legislation that we can help.
Affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Some support government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What is your sense of housing as an issue, and which best addresses rental housing affordability? Is it rent control, or building more rentals, or some other solution?
I think building more rentals is the one thing. I think government controls, I just don't like that because it can escalate into something that's even worse. I've talked to some of the landlords, and there are people that are having rough times, but there are also other people that somehow take advantage of it. It is tough. There are some people coming in and they need not only a security deposit, but an exit deposit, and then their first month rent. That could be a few $1,000s to come up with. And suddenly, they're 6 months down the road, they haven't paid any of it, and so the renter is out, possibly evicted, and meanwhile, the landlord is out $8,000 of income. So I think building more rental units and being able to make it so they can only, have like maybe the entry fee and then the first month's rent, so you don't put the person who is working to try to make ends meet behind the 8 ball by such a large margin. But I do think there's compromises and there's solutions to that. But I do feel what you mentioned there about building more housing is happening around Wausau.
Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures?
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job here in the Wausau area. One of the economic budget request I had was for the new Forensic Regional Science Center that is going to be here on the North Central Technical College campus. It will provide 2 pathologists and autopsies, which will help the northern counties because they have to go to Madison and Milwaukee, and that's overworked. So now we will be able to have that. As far as the hospitals out west, that's tragedy. Senator Jesse James has been working hard to try to see that, Representative Emerson in that area. But somehow we have to make sure that they stay feasible, but they're also a nonprofit.
Do you support increasing Medicaid reimbursement for hospitals?
I think in areas, yes. I think mental health is one area, psychiatry. Those are areas that reimbursement is low. I think we need to think about getting more money into the hands so we can reach that.
Speaking of mental health, it is a growing concern for many Wisconsinites and for state and county budgets. What specifically would you want to do to address mental health concerns in the state?
I had an interesting conversation with a child psychiatrist. And right now, we as individuals can get a monthly, yearly checkup, and the insurance companies pay for it because it's preventative medicine. She says, what if we did something like that for individuals starting as early as 5 years old to come in once a year just for a counseling session and maybe head off some of the problems, because it seems like at puberty a lot of these things explode on some of these kids. And I just thought that was a great idea. We did pass a bill that will let family counselors be able to go into the high schools. We worked with DPI to get that through to add more ammunition in that. But I do really think that the trauma that happens in families we have to address, and then not only address the child, but if it need be, maybe help the parents that have had trauma in their lives.
How should Wisconsin move forward on the issue of abortion?
That's a good question. I have some rather, I guess you could say, untruthful stuff coming out about me. Of course, it's legal. 20 weeks, legal in Wisconsin. The spring of 25, the spring of 23, I sent out a survey because it was a big issue, and talked to my constituents on if they would want access to abortion limited up to 15 weeks. Nearly 80% wanted that. Now, I might be pro-life, I've had that, but you've got to listen to your constituents. So last February, I did get on a bill that would offer access for abortion up to 15 weeks, mirroring what they do in Europe, and set limitations to it. And we wanted to put it out as a referendum for the people in April to see, do they want 20 weeks or do they want 15? But the governor vetoed the bill, so we didn't able to get it on. But that's what I support now. I also support more access and affordability to contraceptive, and I also want to work again to expand postpartum care 12 months, because as children and families doing the research, 5 to 9 months, a lot of the maternity fatalities happen, and we just can't cut it off at 3 months or so. So those are the areas I'm looking to work on again.
What are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that these are addressed, and for the state to keep on schedule with the reconstruction of aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
Right. I think the roads are very important. I'm glad the shared revenue was able to get through and help in some of those concerns. I know in talking with former Secretary Thompson of the Transportation, a lot of money was earmarked for the northern part of the state, which is good. We do have some projects coming up on Business 51 in the area that are much needed. I think when it comes to other transportation, like our transit system in Wausau, there's got to be other solutions. Ridership is maybe not as full as Madison has in Milwaukee, but in the same sense, it's needed. There's some folks that are senior citizens. There are folks that need to get to work that maybe can't drive or don't have a vehicle. We have to find out some solution. Does it mean we get the other communities involved? Does it mean that we maybe get smaller buses? Maybe even go to like an Uber system where people request transportation and a day out, and we come pick them up and take them to where they need to go. We're kind of like between the Madison area and a small community that I don't know if we have enough to fully have the transit system, because right now it's Monday through Friday just in Wausau. But I do know it has needs, and I do trying to work with everyone across the aisle to see if we can figure out something that would work.
PFAS and other water contaminants are a concern for a growing number of Wisconsinites. Do you see this as an important issue, and how would you propose to address it?
Yes, I do think it is. Clean water, clean air are very important. We have to keep our soil clean, our wells clean. As I see in so many signs in yards, the water is life, which is true. We have, here in Wausau, they did invest in a system that will take the PFAS out. I do know there's extensive testing, and I know we put a lot of money into PFAS. I think right now the discrepancy is that we want to make sure that a farmer that maybe buys a farm or puts sludge on a farm that comes from a factory and didn't know it had PFAS in it, that they're not personally sued, because that would maybe wreck their farm, wreck their whole life. And I think that's the difference why the money's not being released yet. We want reassurances for local farmers that they won't take the brunt of something that they didn't realize was happening on their farm.
We're down to the final two questions.
Okay.
How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
I think experience. I think my experience helps out a lot. A lot of the rhetoric is, I said it when I first ran in a campaign, I'll work across the aisle, all that. Well, I've actually got a record of working across the aisle. 7 bills were signed in this time with bipartisan support, from the Like-Kin bill to our VOCA funding, $10 million we needed to keep domestic violence and the women's community healthy here. So those are issues that I have, and I do think bipartisanship is good. So I think experience, being able to bring things back to Wausau and Marathon County, is the biggest difference at this time.
Final question. Let's say you're reelected to the Assembly. You get this magic wand you can use in the state capitol to resolve one issue in a way that brings all parties together. What do you think that issue is?
I had a bill that fizzled out in the Senate last time, and it's a palliative care bill. It was a palliative care board would be established in the state that would attract, hopefully, palliative care doctors. So many people are somehow mixed up that they think palliative care is hospice, and all it is a bridge to that. I went through it personally with my father, and what it does is it brings social workers, therapists, dialysis units all together working rather than have to individually go out. And Green Bay and Brown County, they have a great palliative care doctor. But it passed the Assembly, but it didn't quite make it through the Senate. So if I had a magic wand, that would be one I'd love to see get through.
All right. Thank you, Representative Pat Snyder of Weston, the Republican incumbent candidate for the 85th Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Representative Snyder, thank you for joining WisconsinEye.
Well, thank you for having me.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.